Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Jon Rennie. Jon is the founder and CEO of Peak Demand Incorporated, a manufacturer of critical components for electrical utilities. He is a former U.S. Navy nuclear submarine officer who made 7 deployments during the end of the Cold War. Prior to starting Peak Demand, he led 8 manufacturing businesses for 3 global companies. He is the author of 3 best-selling leadership books and the host of the Deep Leadership podcast. Jon, it is great to have you here on the Voice of Influence podcast.
Hi, Andrea. Good to see you.
Okay, nuclear submarine.
Yes.
What roles did you play throughout your time on the submarines?
So I was an officer on board the USS Tennessee, and as a what they call it a line officer. So that meant that you were training to be in someday be command of a submarine. So they put you in various different roles. So my first job, I was the reactor controls officer. So I was in charge of the team that maintained all of the electronic controls for the nuclear reactor. Then I was the machinery division officer, which meant I had all the mechanical components of the engine room, which had a nuclear reactor in it. And then I was the missile officer at for my third role, and that we had 24 nuclear weapons. So I was in charge of our nuclear weapon arsenal during that time. So I had some interesting jobs as a 20-year-old
Yeah.
just coming out of college.
Yes. Okay, so this is what I was holding myself back from saying before we started. But we actually went to nuclear school graduation this last summer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in South Carolina,
Yep.
um, because our nephew is beginning his career at, working with as a nuclear engineer in the
Yeah.
Navy. So I have a tiny itsy bitsy bit of knowledge about this topic, and I am very fascinated with your experience and with just with so much about this. I mean, it's really hard for me to imagine anybody being on a submarine, especially a family member.
Yeah.
Especially because I have like major issues with being trapped. So like I would not pass any of the psych evals. But obviously you did. I'm wondering what was one of the hardest things for you to get used to when you first started in the Navy?
Well, it's an interesting weapons platform, a submarine, because you operate alone. So you don't operate with other ships or other, you're operating with like a group. We go out on our own, completely on our own. So we'll be hundreds of miles away from the nearest asset, hundreds of feet below the surface, and we rely on the crew. We rely on each other to keep us safe, carry out the mission, and then get home safely. So it's a really interesting military branch to serve in. So it's unlike anything else that exists out there. So
Yeah.
we are all in it together. And what was interesting is that so if something bad happens, we all die. So it's you're all in it together. So there's this shared responsibility to run the ship effectively, but also a shared vulnerability. Like if anything goes wrong, we all perish.
Mm.
So it was a really interesting place to learn leadership, to experience just personalities, under the ocean for 3 months at a time, just seeing how people react to those kind of environments. And then, of course, we're doing very dangerous things.
Hmm.
Um, I mentioned a nuclear reactor, nuclear missiles, and a bunch of 18-year-olds. Right, so
Yeah.
it's a really interesting environment to learn about people, and I love people, and I love watching how people respond and react to challenges, and so it's a really great place to learn leadership. But yeah, the whole it's so foreign, it's hard to describe. It's so foreign that but you get used to it after a while. Once you do it for a while, it becomes your life, and then working in an office seems foreign, when
Yeah.
once you leave that environment. So
Right. Well, that was my next question. Like, okay, so what's the hardest thing getting used to in the Navy? But then when you leave the Navy, that's been your life for so long.
yeah.
You've been in these really high intensity environments where it's very structured and you have so much I don't know, camaraderie, I assume, and then you come back and try to enter into the corporate world. What was one of the hardest things for you to get used to in that transition?
I mean, it was almost everything.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing was in the Navy, in the military, you have a mission. You join for the bigger picture, right? You join for the mission that you're going to be doing, and so we're serving the country. It's a service job. You're doing it because you want to, right? For me, it was a dream that I had as a child to be an officer on a nuclear submarine. It seems weird, but that was my dream.
Wow.
But and so you leave, and like many, I got a job in the corporate world. I started off as an associate design engineer in a cubicle, of which the light above my head didn't work, and I didn't get a computer for 3 weeks. And the only thing in my drawer was a stapler. And I was thinking, why did I leave the military? There's no mission here. What's my purpose in life, and why am I here? And just really struggling with my identity of who I am now that I'm no longer a naval officer on a submarine, no longer this really important position, even as a 26-year-old, but as a very important position, to now I'm just a cubicle dweller in a big corporation. And so it took me about 7 years to sort of find my true north again. And that's a common theme amongst
Yeah.
many, just sort of figuring out, okay, why am I put on earth? What's my purpose, and why am I here? And it took me 7 years, but once I found it, I found my mission again. And so I think it's a hard thing, because the camaraderie is not there, because I would say to guys like, hey, let's go out, for a beer or something. They're like, I have a family. What are you talking about? And the other thing was, I couldn't get used to sitting on my butt in a cubicle. I'd pace up and down the rows, and my peers are like, what are you doing? I'm like, how can you guys just sit here? Like, shouldn't we be doing something? It was really hard for me to get used to sitting down and just being in front of a computer when I eventually got one. But yeah, it was really hard to find my mission and in a big company. And what was the priority? Well, it was always conflicting. Make money. Was it good quality? I never knew what the mission was. It wasn't clear to me. So yeah, I was lost and confused for about 7 years before I sort of like, oh, okay, this is what I meant to do. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so many things because first of all, I understand that of the mission situation because we actually have somebody on our team that was a lieutenant colonel in the army, and every time we meet, she starts out with what's the intent? What are you trying
Mm.
to accomplish? She's always wanting to make sure that we at least know the immediate mission. Um, and I really value that. And I feel like that's an important thing for us to incorporate everywhere. I think everybody can use that to make sure that you're all on the same page about what you're even trying to do. But then also the fact that there's so many people that come out of the military and they're not sure what to do with their careers from there is really disheartening, I think, or it's concerning. How did you get into manufacturing? How did you come to that particular job? But then also, what, I guess this is like a double question, but I feel like what should businesses be seeing in people that are coming out of the military so that they understand what they have to bring and offer their companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of misunderstanding about veterans. So they think that because you're in the military that you're used to a command and control structure, right? I could tell you this, being on a submarine, it was all about teamwork. It was all about relationships. It was all about like working to influence people versus, here's my rank and follow me. So all of the things that you need to be like really good in leadership and really good at working with people, we had to have, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't yes, when the chips were down, it went command and control, and we ran the ship like the captain said, we're going to do this, and we all go, yes, sir, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
most days was the kind of things you deal with in business. So first of all, there's a misconception about veterans, right? So that we do work really well with others to get difficult things done, and that's something that we have the skill. But I think the big thing is when you're in service of your country, yes, there's a lot of your path is really defined, right? You kind of know how to rank up, how to get to the next position, right? But you're also on a very much, you're doing something that's an important service to the country, right? You're doing something that's really significant. at 26 years old, I'm commanding as an officer of deck. I'm in charge of a nuclear submarine, right, at sea, right? That's a big responsibility. And then when you get thrust into like a job, if you will, in a cubicle, with, oh, you're going to do this AutoCAD drawing today, you're like, this is not important. Like, this is not, it's nowhere near the importance of what I had in my life at one point in time. And a lot of people find that they struggle, like they're a smaller fish, like they were kind of an important part of like a helicopter crew or a plane crew or driving a tank, and now they're driving a cubicle. But for me at least, I got into I had two job offers out of the military. One was working for Merck Pharmaceutical, doing pharmaceutical sales, which I have no idea anything about that. And then I had a job offer as an engineer. I have an engineering background, as an engineer for a large global company that did electrical engineering, electrical products, and that job was in Florida, and my wife is from Florida, so we're like, well, I don't know anything about pharmaceutical sales, so let's go this way. So it was really by chance that was one of the two job offers I had, and so I went into this field, and didn't really have a passion for it. But after 5 years of being with that company, I was promoted. I kept moving up in my and moving up in my job responsibilities, and then they asked me to run a manufacturing plant. My first manufacturing plant at 32 years old, I got a chance to run a 140 person manufacturing plant. And then I began to feel like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is like captaining your own ship. This is fun.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't until my second manufacturing plant. So I did that job for about 3.5 years. And then I took over another plant that was really struggling. And then when I realized that I can make an impact in the lives of people
Mm.
with a struggling business, and I can actually lead them out of that, that's when I found my passion again. It's like, oh, I have a mission to help turn around struggling businesses. And that became my new mission. So I went from like protect the country against, at the time, it was the Soviets, right? That was my life, to I was a little bit lost, till wow, I have found that I absolutely love engaging people in a business turnaround situation. And that's what I did. I ended up running 8 different manufacturing businesses during my corporate career, over about 22 years, and I absolutely loved it.
Mm. Okay, a couple more questions about submarine, and then I promise we'll move on to leadership. But
That's
this is
fine.
actually very similar. I mean, it all relates, obviously. You've written 3 books about it. So, but I would imagine that maintaining like control over your emotions is fairly important on a submarine. Is that true?
Yeah, so this is really important. I mean, we talk about authenticity is important in leadership, right? But
Yeah.
there's also a part of it that you have to recognize, is that you are on stage 24/7. So as a leader on a submarine, so there was only 15 officers on board, and we had a crew of 155. So every eyeball was on you 24/7, right? So you couldn't go home after a bad day. You couldn't kick up your feet and have a beer. You couldn't take the weekend off or take a long weekend. You were in it 24/7 while you were deployed. And so what does that mean? What did that mean? Well, you were on stage 24/7. So every eye was on you to see how you reacted to problems. And so you had to have, you know, again, I would say I was authentic, but also controlled in terms of my emotion, because as in terms of leadership, is that our attitude is contagious, right? So if we're panicking all the time, or if we're anxious all the time, or if we're depressed all the time, then that kind of spreads. And so you end up learning how to control your emotions a little bit, so that you are, you're also positively affecting the people around you
Mm,
as well. And so
mm.
I've learned that, and I learned that from my captain, watching him. So my first deployment, I was in the North Atlantic in a massive winter storm that lasted 7 days. I thought I was going to die because it was terrible. And
Wow.
if you look at the North Atlantic in the wintertime, it is awful.
What, how,
We
can you just tell me, like, give me the picture of what like you're on the submarine. Why do you think that you're going to die in this storm? Because to me, and my imagination, you're not necessarily feeling a lot of storm, but you must have been.
Oh yeah, we were feeling it. It's almost like being like in a washing machine. You're just getting
Oh,
tumbled
wow.
about. And so a submarine has a round hull, and so when it starts taking rolls, they go 45 degrees, and
Wow.
so everything is everything that's not tied down is falling down, and And so this was, ongoing for days and days. And so we could try to get deep sometimes, and we could get away from it a little bit, but it would only be for, maybe an hour, and then it would start hitting us again. So it was affecting deep water as well. That's how. And so I remember going to periscope depth one day, and I was the junior officer of the deck at the time, and I came up to periscope depth, and I looked, I could see, 60, 70, 100-foot waves all around me, like in this
Oh my
little tiny
gosh.
periscope. And I'm just like, this isn't good. This is not a good place to be, right? This is not where humans are supposed to be. But I remember just always looking at the captain, and one thing about him is he always had control. He always seemed like maybe he didn't have control, but he always kind of knew the next steps and what to do, and
Mm,
he never panicked, right? And I
mm,
think that was a really important lesson for me, is like, okay, you might be in a situation where it is dangerous, or there might be, there's a stressful situation, but how you control your emotions through that is really important in leadership. And the second thing too is he was very competent. And so that's another thing I learned about leadership, is that you can't just be authentic and a great listener and all these things and a good people person. You have to be competent at your craft, right?
mm,
We are looking at the captain to save our bacon in this situation, right? And so the same thing with our people in our businesses, is they are looking to you as like, not only are you, authentic and you're a listener and you care about them, that's all, and you're empathetic, all those things are important, but they're also saying, are you competent? Am I going to hitch my wagon to this horse, right? Because people want to know that they have a competent boss. And so that part of our jobs as leaders, and I learned that from my days in the submarine, is you better be competent in your craft too if you want to
mm,
be the boss.
mm. Those are such good points. What an image. I just can't even imagine. And yet I can picture you looking to the captain and him holding that confidence that we have what it takes to get through. Like
Mm.
when you see that in somebody else, the person who is at the helm, I guess, um, and then I can see how that would be contagious.
Yeah, you were confident, so it took away it took away the scariness of the situation. And so think about what we just went through with COVID, right?
Yeah.
How do we respond as leaders to the unknown, right? And when people are going to say, well, what's next? Are we going to shut down? Is the plant, I've run a manufacturing company myself now, my own company. Are we going to, my people said, are we going to shut down? Are we considered essential workers? I didn't know the answers to any of those questions. So how do you put people at ease when you don't know the answer to what's going to happen? And I learned a lot of those lessons from watching my captain, and how he dealt with, difficult situations where he didn't know all the answers, but he was control what you control, and keep moving forward, keep people informed.
Mm.
And I think there's lessons in that as well.
So how did you handle that with COVID then? How did you communicate that kind of stability and confidence?
Yeah, it's one thing that I learned also in the military was, when you don't know something, you can say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I think sometimes leaders struggle with. There's a lot of fear in leadership, I've noticed, is that people act out of fear a lot, which is fear of being found out that I don't know what I'm doing, fear of being embarrassed, fear of like public speaking. There's a lot of fear involved. And so uh, I think that it's okay to say you don't know. That's they taught us that when you go through basic training, it's just like when you don't know something, you say, I don't know, but I'll find out, sir. And it was like a really important lesson. So I think with my folks, I think I was able to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question. To say, should we all be wearing masks? What's going to go on with vaccines? What should we be social distancing? And I said, well, I don't know that, but I'm gonna find out. I'm going to let you know. We're going to make a decision on that. And so I think it's okay to say you don't know, but
Yeah.
also remind them that you're going to look into it and you're going to get back to them. And I think the people that say, oh, well, what we're going to do is, and they have all the answers, I think that's fake. And I think people can sense fakeness. And I just don't like being fake.
Yeah.
It's one of my things.
Yes, yes. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot in our trainings is moving out of that reactionary mode and into this more mindful state where we can make intentional decisions rather
Mm.
than decisions based that are like automatically based on the emotional reaction we're having. And I think that that's a lot of what you're talking about here. It's like yeah, you have that maybe you might have that initial gulp or fear in your gut, but then to take a step back and be able to say, but wait a second, I got a bigger mission here. I know that I'm seeing that we can do something about this. Let's focus on what we can do. Like you're like that, just all of that feels to me like that mindful state that that we talk about.
Yeah, if you can take a little bit of time and separate your initial reaction
Yeah.
to what your next comments are, if you're able to do that, I think you end up having a better response instead of a reaction. So I think that's really important. I tend to take a little step back because actually it's one of the things I do a lot, especially when I get bad news or bad information. I do not react. I actually give myself
Mm.
time to reflect on it and
Mm.
before I say something. Sometimes I'll take a day or two with bad news and I'm like, I got to let that one simmer for a bit.
Yes.
That one hurts, so I got to figure
Yes.
out what that means. And I think it helps, like when I do break bad news to my employees, for example. I already thought about it and I'll say, well, this is what's happened, this is the news, it's not good, but here's what I've been thinking, and here's, I think, the best thing we can do moving forward. So I've had that chance to sort of reflect on it versus just having an emotional outburst
Mm.
with some bad news. So I think that's something that I've learned. I've been practicing leadership for 30 years, and I think that's probably one of the things that's gotten better. When I was a young person, I would fly off the handle when bad news came. Like, what? We knew we had to get this out on time. I can't believe it. I mean, I was just a hothead. And I think as I've gotten older, I've recognized that that's not the right way to respond as a leader.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? It's even more authentic, I think, because
Yeah.
it's bringing more of the whole of you to the problem instead of just your initial reaction, which a lot of people will say, well, this is just real. This is just how I feel. I'm just going to say what I think, like, no, 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 no. That's not the authentic you. That's the reactionary you. The
Yeah.
authentic you is the one that takes a step back and does what you're talking about and says, well, wait a second. What do I really know? What do I really
Mm.
believe? What do I want to bring to this problem? That is the most authentic you.
Yeah, I think so. I really do, because that's we are built for that. We're built
Yeah.
for, like, our subconscious is amazing. Like I know my subconscious is smarter than I am, so I always like let it, the expressions, sleep on that decision, let me sleep on it.
Yeah.
It's because your subconscious is doing all the work. It's doing all the calculations. How many times have you woken up the next day with a problem? You go to bed with a problem, you wake up and you have the solution, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, I just needed, my brain needed time to process what's happening all around you.
Mm.
And I think that's so, don't, especially if you're in a position where you have to make a lot of decisions, I say be decisive, but also give your time. If you got a big decision to make and you're struggling, give your subconscious a chance to, ponder it. Because I think I think it's miraculous how many good ideas I have in the shower in the morning, like, that I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, that's been bothering me, and all of a sudden it just comes to me because your brain has been thinking about it.
It's so true. Like taking a walk and doing all those
Yeah.
things that are just like you think that you're not being busy, but your brain is actually doing so much work. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Your books are called All in the Same Boat. You have the watch and I have the watch. So my question is, what does it mean to have the watch and why did you choose that title for like two of your books?
Well, having the watch is a really interesting part of the military. So, in the Navy, when you had the watch, you were responsible for the mission and the people during that point in time. So, for example, as a submarine officer, I stood officer of the deck, and I was in charge of the submarine for 6 hours at a time. So the captain, typically I stood the mid watch, so I'd stand watch from midnight to 6 in the morning. The captain was asleep, and I was responsible for everything on that submarine while he slept. So when we're the leader, we have the watch. We have that responsibility for the mission and the people that work for us. So I emphasize the and, because we have a lot of leaders, or even managers or what have you, that maybe put the mission first, and people, are far, second or third priority. And then we have some people that put people first and they kind of forget about the mission. And I think the connective tissue between having the watch is that you're responsible for the mission and the people. So, and I think that's a really important element of the kind of leadership teaching I talk about, is that we cannot accomplish the mission without our people, and we cannot take care of our people if we don't achieve the mission. And these two are interconnected. And so I think that's what I try to talk about in my books, the interconnectivity between the mission and the people.
Mm. So a lot of times leaders struggle with that balance or that tension, maybe inside of themselves, even like, so I have this mission or I have this vision that I feel like we should do, but at the same time, I really care about these people and I want them to be on board. And so it's hard sometimes. I've seen it be difficult for people to balance getting people's perspectives and consensus with, but I still have a vision and this is the direction that we should take, and kind of being a little more directive. What is your take on how to navigate both sides of that at the same time?
It is really difficult. Leadership is really difficult. I mean, because essentially it boils down to leadership is about motivating a group of people to get something difficult done, right? So that's what the basis of leadership is. So that involves people, motivation, and a goal, right? And so we as leaders have to be able to define the goal, right? Make sure we find the right people, right, to be part of that team, and then we have to motivate those people towards that goal. Now, the best way to motivate people I found is that when they are doing what they've been placed on earth to do, right? So when they're accomplishing their own personal mission in support of the company's mission, like I did in the military, life is good. You've got motivated, engaged employees doing what they absolutely love to do. So like you might have a sales manager who is born to sell, right? And she is just the top-notch sales person, and she loves what she does, and she's crushing it. Life is good. We're getting orders coming in. She loves what she does. And she's accomplishing her goals in life. So it's the same thing. Do we have a group of people that are doing what they've been placed on earth to do in various roles? And that's the challenge of leadership, is trying to figure out, do I have the right people? Are they in the right roles? What are they truly motivated by? Because you're going to find out that everybody's different. I tell the story of my two grown sons, right? My oldest, they both play football. My oldest son, the coaches would get in his face and scream and yell at him, and he would smile. He loved that direct, angry feedback. He thrived on it. And then my other son would get emotional when that happened. So same two people, two kids grown up in the same house, 3 years apart, and they have a completely different reaction to in this case someone getting angry at them. The point is that every person is different. Every person on your team is motivated different. Even people from the same family are going to act different during change, during stress, so I think a lot of what I talk about is you really got to have to know your people. You have to really understand what their motivations are, what are their hopes and dreams, what do they want to accomplish in their careers, and then try as best you can to put all those puzzle pieces together to fit into a puzzle that makes sense for your business. And it never ends. You're constantly working on it. And I think that's probably why I've been in leadership for so long, is because you're never at a point where everything is working perfectly. You always get something that's sort of wandered off, and you've got to try to bring it back. And I love that part of it, is just trying to figure it all out and make it work. But it's definitely a struggle. But the times where I've had a team truly doing what they feel like they've been put on earth to do in support of our mission as a company, then you can pretty much accomplish anything. But it's hard, and those moments are very short when you have those.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of getting people in positions where they really feel like they're doing what they're put on earth to do, but I know that that's not always possible, or it's not realistic that it's happening all the time. And I appreciate the fact that you're saying it's a constant, challenge that you continually deal with. And I'm wondering, okay, so what about the people? So we've got a lot of Gen Z coming up that is the kids that are, I shouldn't say kids.
Kids, you
They're
can
my
say
kids,
it.
but younger professionals who are coming into the workforce saying, I want to be able to do the thing that I'm put on earth to do, but they're really struggling to find that. Or I mean, there's plenty of people that are older that are struggling with that too. Um, but they feel like they were born to be a leader, but they're just entering the workforce. You know what I mean? Like it takes a while to kind of make your way into that position. What advice do you have for somebody that's in a position where maybe they don't feel like this is what they're really like meant to do, but they can't just automatically get that job.
Yeah, no, I think experimenting is really important. I mean, and trying different things. And I think one of the things I try to do with employees is if I see somebody that's really kind of, I want to advance, I want to move into leadership. So I'll give them like stretch assignments or move them into a completely different type of role
Mm,
just to get them a chance to experience that and to win, and then we both learn something through that, which is, I really love that, can I do more of it, or I didn't like that at all, can I go back to what I was doing before, or maybe I should be trying customer service or something like that. So the point is, I think that I really highly encourage young people to try as many things as possible until you sort of find what really resonates with you personally. And I would say this is, I think a lot of younger people, and again, I have Gen Z employees working for me, millennials working for me, and I think especially the Gen Zs, I think they're, I don't want to generalize, but I think a lot of them are a little bit lost. Like they don't,
yeah.
like the world has changed a lot from when I entered the workforce, right? And you can be a lot of different things that you couldn't be before. Like you
Mm,
could be, we're podcasting right now. We're basically, we are media these days, right? And I run a podcast myself. I think, wow, I've taken over like professional radio is, we podcasters have taken over that. YouTube, and you can do so many things in your career. And I think people are a little bit lost, like, oh, I can do so much that I can't narrow it down to the few things that really get me excited. So I think we need to guide young people. I have a young Gen Z that's working for me, college graduate, in a general business degree, didn't really know what he wanted to do. And he's just thriving in our company because I just keep teaching him. He's learning about the business. He now he does all of our quotations. He
mm,
technically knows our products like in and out. And today he's out in the shop floor testing, doing electrical testing of one of our more complicated product lines, and he's talking like he's an engineer, and he has no engineering degree. He doesn't realize that he's come so far. And I tell him all the time, it's like, do you realize you're talking the language that I speak, that I learned in college, that you've just been exposed to at our company? He's like, I love this. This is so cool, And so I think that we need, I think, as more experienced leaders in the workforce need to help younger people, guide them along, and help give them experiences and let them find their own path as to what makes sense for them in their careers. But I think younger people need a little bit more guidance than maybe the older generations, because we didn't have a lot of choices. We
yeah.
just, you go to work, get a gold
It's
watch. Yeah.
it's absolutely true. And I love everything you just said because the mentorship, the paying attention to people, giving them stretch assignments, I love that concept. And that allow them to do some experimenting. I think that it's when people feel like they don't have that they're in a dead end situation that they just give up, which is understandable. I
Yeah.
think most of us do. So yeah, I think that your emphasis on guiding them is super important because they do need guidance. Talk to me about having the employees' backs. Because one thing that I think a lot of leaders know, they might know that they should have their backs, but what does that look like? And why is it that sometimes they don't?
Well, it's a really important point. It's something that I learned through a good leader I worked for. But one of the things in the Navy they taught us when it came to leading people is that you can delegate authority, right? But you can never delegate responsibility. So you can give people all they needed to be able to be successful at the job that they've been delegated to. But as a leader, you always retain the responsibility. In other words, if anything goes wrong, it's my fault. Even though I've delegated the task to this person, it's still my fault if they fail to do it correctly, right? That was the mentality I came into the civilian workforce with, because that's the way they trained us.
Which I
Now,
would say, just let me just throw this. The
yeah,
one of the things that I'm seeing a lot, and unfortunately too often, is the flip of that.
that's exactly it. That's what
Okay,
exactly what
go
I
on. Let me
no,
just
that's exactly
let you
what I
talk.
noticed. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I noticed when I came into corporate. It was like we delegate the responsibility of a task to young people or to someone, but then the boss holds all the authority. So you can't hire anybody, you can't spend any money, and so the ultimately the job doesn't get done, right? And so then the boss blames the subordinate for not getting the job done. So they weren't given the full authority to get the job done, but they were held accountable,
Mhm.
responsible for the lack of performance. And so that person gets let go or gets demoted because they, because and the boss is doing in a lot of cases to protect their career, to save their bacon, right? So to make sure that they are not going to be in trouble if something bad goes down, right? And so this is the sort of corporate environment. And so bosses protecting their own careers and throwing their people under the bus, to protect their own careers. I saw that time and time and time again in my corporate days. But I had a boss, and I talk about it in one of my books. I don't remember which one, but I do talk when I talk to college students. I bring the story up a lot where I was a young design engineer working on a brand new product development, and we were spending a lot of money to test this product, and it was a very highly visible product. We were trying to be first to the market, and so it was highly visible. Everybody's watching what happened. And I was in charge of all the product testing, and we had a major product failure the first time I went to the test lab. And the gear, which is supposed to be designed to not explode, actually did explode and cost us a lot of money. There was a lot of embarrassment. But I had a boss at the time who just said to me, he just said, he asked me two things. I had to call him. He wasn't, I was up at a test lab. I called back to the factory and I said, hey, we had this failure, and he said, John, he said, do you know what went wrong? And I said, yeah, I know exactly how it failed and why it failed. He said, can you fix it? I said, yes, I can fix it. He said, well, get back here. Let's get it done. And so we can get back to the test lab. So, that was an example of a boss who had my back, right? When things went bad, it probably hurt him in his career because of this setback, right? But he never once pointed the finger at me. He never once blamed me. He said he supported me to get back and redesign it and get back to the lab. And we did. A month later, we got back to the lab. We passed all the tests. We were the first to the market. It became a multi-million-dollar super success story for our company. We won all sorts of awards and all that. But it was all because he had my back and he didn't throw me under the bus. And never once did he ever say anything negative to me about that situation. He always supported me. And think about my loyalty to that person after that point, right? I would run through a brick wall for this guy. And I did. I worked 24/7 for a month to get back to the test lab because I knew it was important that that I, you know, that I performed to his expectations because I cared about him, because I knew he cared about me. And I think that's something you don't see enough of in leadership.
Mm, great example. What do you think that leaders can do to do a better job of demonstrating that they really care about their team members?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting question, huh? How do we show we care, right? And I think we show we care by our presence. It really comes right down to that. And our presence is being there, showing up where they're at. So a lot of I see too many I saw too many corporate bosses sequester themselves away in their offices, in conference rooms, on conference calls. They're busy, right? And so they're always too busy to spend time where their people are and what their people are doing. And so there's a comment that I use from lean manufacturing called Gemba. And Gemba is, the place where value is added, and that's where most of your people are at. So you have to go there. You not bring them to you. And I had a lot of bosses that did that in my career too. Like, you never had a meeting with him in your space. It was always in his or her space. And so you go to where your people are and you listen, you talk, and you observe. I run a factory right now. I run a manufacturing business. As soon as we're done with this call, I'll be out on the shop floor. I am talking with my people. I'll actually do a few little things on the shop floor that I make sure that they have the inventory they need. And I'll just, sometimes I'll jump on a forklift if I need to, because I run a small business, but they see me, my presence is there, and I'm talking to them every day. How's your daughter? How's school going? I know it's her first year, just getting to know our people so they know that I'm not just here about making the numbers. I'm here about making sure that they have good careers and they have a place where they like to come to work every day.
Mm. It's probably more likely that they're going to talk to you too, then. Getting people to share their perspective and direct feedback and that sort of thing with leaders is really, really difficult to do. I mean, there's so many reasonable reasons
Yeah,
why it is
yeah.
hard for people to do that. Um, but I would imagine that showing that you care is a piece of why you're able to get that kind of feedback. Is that, I mean, I assume that you are getting that kind of feedback.
It is, and it's funny because you see me if you I don't know, is this on video or not? I don't know, just audio, but I don't. I wear a t-shirt. I wear a t-shirt and jeans and boots, right, at work. I do it actually for a reason because I don't want to say that I'm better than you. Like a lot of times I saw in corporate where people would be dressed up and the people with the big titles had the tie on, or the suit jacket and the fancy office and the fancy coffee machine and I think it was always an us and them attitude. And
Mm,
on a submarine, there was no us and them. We wore the same uniform. We slept in the same size rack. We drank the same crappy coffee. If the kitchen was down, we had cold food. So I'm used to suffering together and not just having a group of people with special parking privileges and ones without. I believe my second book is called All in the Same Boat. I believe that we are all in the same boat. We're in a business, and you might be the CEO, and I am the CEO, but that doesn't mean I'm any better than any one of my employees. And I think they see that in me, and they recognize that I'm not trying to act like I'm anything special. I'm
mm,
just one of I am just another employee at this company, but I just have a different job to do than you do, and that's it.
mm,
I'm no better than any one of my employees. In
mm,
fact, they're more important than I am because they're the ones building a product for my customer. They're talking on the phone with my customers. They're taking care of my customers. They're much more important than I am.
and yet you have decision-making authority. So, like, how does that translate?
Yeah, well, that's the hard part, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's the hard part of our jobs is we have to make the decisions on behalf of the company. But here's the deal: we don't have to do it alone, right? We have a team of experts working for us, and so a lot of times I'll come into decisions where it is hard, where I can argue both sides of it. And so I think having a good relationship with employees means here's what I'm facing right now. I can do one or two things. What do you guys think? And I think it's a great chance to hear feedback. And ultimately someone says, "Oh, well, you're running your company like a democracy." No, I'm listening to people, but ultimately at the end of the day, I have to make the decision, right? The captain's the one that's got to put the rudder in the water and steer the ship, but he better get as much he or she better get as much information from the people to make the right decision. And I think that's what great leaders do is they do look for what's the best decision, especially in light of, I mean, we're moving in a world that's very fast. Things happen really quickly. And so we do not, as leaders, have all the answers, right?
Mm,
But I imagine someone in our four walls has the answers and can give us good counsel. So seek out good counsel, make solid decisions, and be able to justify your decisions, and be able to explain the why behind your decisions. That's really important.
mm.
And great leaders will give you the why, right? And we are curious. People are curious. We want to know, like, why did you go down this path, right?
Yeah,
And and if you don't have a good answer, if you just say, well, because that's good for my bonus check, well, then you're not going to get a lot of loyal followers.
totally. Um, your podcast title, the name of your podcast is Deep Leadership.
Yes.
Um, Tell me why you chose that name.
Former submarine officer can't do something without the word deep in it. So, but the other thing I would say is that that's the nature of leadership. It's really a deep ocean. I was talking, so I'm right now pursuing a doctorate in strategic leadership. And I remember talking to my first professor. I said, "I'm really angry at you." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I've been practicing leadership for 30 years. And I figured I've seen it all, done it all. Right." And they said, "But I show up to this academic institution and I feel like I climbed a mountain. My first course, I feel like I climbed a mountain and I looked over and there was a vast ocean of knowledge and research in leadership that I had no idea about. It never got to us practitioners." And so I would say that the subject of leadership, there's been 15,000 books written on leadership, and I believe there's probably that was probably 2 years ago. It's probably 16,000 now, right? But the point is that we're trying to figure this out, and it's very complicated, and I think it takes a short amount of time to understand leadership, but it takes a lifetime to master it. And so I think on our podcast, we're exploring all the different facets of leadership and trying to give our listeners tools, tricks, techniques, ideas, experiences to help them be more effective in managing and leading people.
Hmm. Okay, just a couple more questions. First,
Sure.
where can people find you and your books?
Oh, everything's at johnsrennie.com.
Okay, and we'll link to it in the show notes.
Yes.
Totally. Last question. This is the Voice of Influence podcast.
Yes.
What last piece of advice would you want to give somebody who wants to have a voice of influence?
Well, I would say this, that leadership is a people business, right? Everything that we do is about people. So, and one of the hardest things that we can do is influence. So, direct positional authority gives you some responsibility to influence people, but the harder thing to do is influence people when you have no authority or when you're not positionally have that positional authority. So, I would say this is that getting to know people, getting to understand who they are, what makes them tick, is the best way to be able to have a voice that will have influence on others. I think it's all about your audience and making sure that you can connect with the audience.
Mm, great advice. Thank you so much for being a voice of influence today for our listeners. And this is great. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you.